Hi, welcome to day 3. We're talking about schedules. We're almost like halfway through this thing, sort of, maybe like after today, halfway. So I hope that you are, making some changes. I hope that you have some goals in mind that you're working towards. And I hope that you're motivated to do this. So let's talk about schedules. Schedules are a little bit tricky when we're talking about such a wide variety of ages. But I'm going to kind of try to lay down some foundation for some schedules because your schedule is going to be key. You want to, when you're working with kids and learning how to sleep independently or just sleeping more restoratively, you want them to be sleeping at the times when their bodies are ready to sleep. You don't want to be fighting an overtired child, someone who's not ready to go to bed. So the schedule really is that foundation that you need to get healthy sleep. So you'll see here that we're talking about naps at first. So here are some recommendations as far as how many naps a child should be taking depending upon how old they are. And you'll see there's some overlap there, but I would try to stick with these guidelines because I find that sometimes people will notice their child has an off day or two. Maybe they skip a nap, maybe they fight their nap for a couple days in a row. And so then they just move to dropping that nap right away. But sometimes that's just not the right move. Sometimes you need to give it a little bit more time. I would say use these age ranges. And then also if you have, I would say a week, give it a week. If your child fights a nap for a week, then, and they're within these age ranges, then you can start thinking about transitioning to less naps. But an off day or two does not mean they're ready. And I do think that that's kind of something that happens sometimes because you just want to make sure, that you're not giving them too much opportunity to sleep, but definitely make sure it's a week before you make any big changes. And so I know we've talked a little bit about wake windows. So there's different thoughts about how the schedule should go. Sometimes people feel like the wake windows, counting how long a person is awake until they sleep again, which is, when we're talking about that sleep pressure that we talked about on day 1, that's really what the wake windows are about. We think this amount of sleep pressure is going to build up and then it's time to go to bed. And so kind of doing that throughout the day. And then the biological clock times, that's more like following the circadian rhythm. So there are times during the day where your body is it ebbs and flows with energy or being ready to sleep. And so kind of going along with that and the sleep pressure, it's hard because both things are working. They're kind of working together. They don't always line up quite right. So here's what I have found to be the most useful for my clients and myself. Using wake windows when kids are like 5 and 6 months and under is a good idea. They're so little and they need so much sleep. So yes, like watching the time, when they're 0 to 3 or 4 months, watching that time after 60 to 90 minutes, are they tired? Should you put them down a little bit longer when they get a little bit older? But then around 5 or 6 months, I like to say once that first nap is starting to get into place, you're seeing that first nap be, 45 minutes or longer pretty consistently, then they're starting to get ready for the biological clock times. And I just find the biological clock times, 1, to be on track. The kids are ready to sleep at these times. Their bodies are ready. And 2, just so much easier than the wake windows. The wake windows are great, but they can certainly, especially if you're a tired mom or a tired dad, it can be overwhelming. So the biological clock times I have found to be much easier to follow. So basically with that, kids, and when I say kids, usually I'm talking about kids 4 months to 5 years. But I mean, in that elementary school range would be about the same. Their bodies want to wake up between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. And I know that might seem early, but that's when they're ready to wake. So if you're going to go with the biological clock times, you let them wake up between 6 and 7. Then that first nap is going to be around 8:39. The second nap is around 12:01. And then if they're on a 3-nap schedule, that cat nap is just a little short one, just to get them to bedtime. It's just going to be 2 hours after waking from the second nap, but not later than 5. And just a short one, less than 45 minutes. But you have this, because I know I'm kind of saying a lot of numbers and stuff. And when you start talking about naps and schedules, it's like, it gets crazy. That's why I've written this down for you. And then here's some samples. I think samples are easier to look at, kind of like, oh, what fits into my day? So you'll see I have like a 3-nap schedule, 2-nap, 1-nap. But with the biological clock times, so I'm talking about like kids like 5 months and up, usually 6 months and up. You want to remember, use that clock as a guideline, because you'll see that there's kind of a little bit of a range that I've put on the previous slide there about when these times are. But then also pay attention to sleepy cues. Sleepy cues are really important too. So know your child's sleepy cues look like. When they're real little, it could look like zoning out, tugging on an ear. Usually if they yawn, honestly, you kind of missed it. That's like, I'm overtired. You're looking for that first sign of like zoning out. And then when they get a little bit older, when you start talking about like a year and up, they don't have those same sleepy cues anymore usually. It could be like getting a little cranky, getting a little whiny, overactivity, especially if we're talking about toddlers. When they start to get overactive, they could be getting their second wind there. And so you really want to get them to bed. So you want to pay attention to both. And I know that some people will say, as far as this biological clock time, Kate, you're saying that the kid's going to wake up between 6 and 7. Well, that's early. I don't want to wake up between 6 and 7 every day. And I get you, but it's definitely something that you can try to work on. Some families say, we have a later schedule. We get home from work late. We want the baby to stay up later with us, and then we want them to sleep later in the morning. And I'm only saying that's definitely something you can try. Obviously you wouldn't be following the biological clock times. You would have to follow more of a wake window type of situation. And if you have kind of easygoing sleeper, then maybe you can shift the whole schedule. But there's a lot of kids and a lot of sensitive sleepers that you try to shift that schedule and you're not getting good naps. You're getting short naps. You're not getting a nice long 11-hour chunk at night. And then it's time to kind of reconsider, like, well, maybe we can wake up at 6 or 7. Maybe we don't want to, which I understand. But maybe that's what's best for the baby right now. And that's just how they sleep the best, is when they follow these biological clock times. It's up to every family to see what works for them. I like these times because I know that this is when the body can sleep. But if it doesn't work for your schedule, then you have to, do some adjusting. And as far as bedtimes, I like to say that bedtimes are consistent yet flexible. So when I'm talking about kids 5 and under, I would never recommend a bedtime after 8 o'clock. It just, like I just said previously, unless you're trying to shift your whole schedule and do something crazy and just kind of hope it works. But for most kids, especially kids waking up at 6 or 7, should not be going to bed anytime later than 8. And what time they do go to bed really depends. It depends. Are you on a 1-nap schedule? Are you on a 3-nap schedule? Also depends a lot on how did you sleep that day? Did you have a big active day? Is it a holiday? Is it a vacation? All these things could factor into making them more tired than they usually are. So that's why you're looking at those sleepy cues too. Especially in the evening, around that 4:30, 5 o'clock, look at your child. Are they acting kind of crazy? Because if they are, then they might have to go to bed a little bit earlier than they normally do. If they're fine, if they had great naps, they're on schedule, then keep your regular bedtime. You should have something in your mind, and again, it depends kind of what your schedule looks like. But that's why it's consistent yet flexible. And then there's always the emergency early bedtime. And people get really crazy when I say that you could put I'm sorry, my cat is here. He wants to be a part of it. When I say you can put your child down to bed as early as 5:30. And I know you're thinking, well, that's great, but then they're going to be up at 3 in the morning for ready for the day. No, probably not. Because if you're putting your child down to sleep at 5:30, it's because they've missed naps or they've had a big day, or they are already overtired. And so they're going to take that time and they're going to sleep probably up until their usual time, 5:36 in the morning. It really depends on your child and on the kind of day that they had. And emergency bedtime is not something that you want to do all the time. You do not want your child to have a 5:30 bedtime. We're really usually shooting more for 6:37 for most ages. It's a good time to have bedtime. But again, if you miss naps, if you had a crazy day, you can back that bedtime up by an hour, and you're going to be able to pay back some of that sleep debt that we talked about from the first day. You're going to get more of that restorative sleep at night. So there's some more information about, as far as at the bottom, age appropriate and when you can kind of get that bedtime. And then maintaining a schedule. So it's really hard, how to maintain this schedule, but also live your life. And that's something that every family needs to figure out. There's a rule, people say, quote unquote rule in sleep, the 80-20 rule, that if you're doing your regular schedule 80% of the time and you're doing it consistently, that you kind of have a 20% leeway to, stay up late, go on vacation, miss a nap. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And when you're talking about work or other kids in school, I know sometimes you think, okay, well, I can't be home for that nap at 8:39. I just can't do it. But some people get creative. Can you drop your kid off a little bit later? Can somebody come over and stay with the baby so they can get that first nap? That first nap of the day is the most important one. What can you do to get that first nap? Sometimes you got to think outside the box, but it really is worth it. And then I already talked a little bit about wanting that later schedule. And like I said, feel free to give it a try. But if it's not working, you're kind of just going against biology. You might have to, rethink why it is that you don't want them waking up at 6 or 7. And then special events, same thing. If you have to juggle your schedule a little bit, like what can you do to get that first nap at home, and then maybe there's a car nap, or maybe you could try to set up the pack and play at somebody's house and bring the white noise machine and all that. Get a little bit creative, but definitely try to keep a schedule. It really is helpful in the long run for everybody. There will be days when you can't do it. And so use that early bedtime and then be ready for a little bit of a crankpot the next day. And that's just how it is. You have to make these decisions about, do I want to skip this nap for, whatever kind of behavior we'll see the next day. And then here's a bunch of questions for daycare, because a lot of daycares will move 12-month-old to the 1-year room where they're only taking one nap, and most 12-month-olds are just not ready for that one nap. So here's some questions and some ways that you can try to see if you can get around that, keep that 2 naps a little bit longer. They also have different regulations as far as how long they'll let the baby try to fall asleep before they just skip a nap. So there's some questions for that. And at the bottom, I said, it's easy if you can just print out a schedule or just write your schedule for your child down on a piece of paper with their name on it and hand it to somebody and say, these are the times I want them to sleep. They've got a lot of kids in that room. And so sometimes they just, it just is not something that they're aware of. But if it's on a piece of paper and it's in front of them, then you've got a chance that they're going to make that work a little bit better for you. So that was a lot. Schedules are crazy. And like I said, I feel like I barely just scratched the surface, especially when we're talking about naps and bedtimes. I think I do have some ideas about doing like a nap challenge at some point in the future, because there is just so much to know about naps and wake windows and biological times. And like I said, when I'm talking about such a broad range of kids, I apologize if I skip over something, but you have my contact information there, so feel free to, you got a question about naps, schedules, all that craziness. Shoot me a message, and then tomorrow we'll talk about bedtimes, which are one of my favorite things to talk about. So I will see you there.